I'm based in the Colorado Rockies, so I have a great view out my living room window of a 14,000-foot mountain, which is fabulous. So that's well over 4,000 meters. And I guess I would describe myself as kind of an adventurer and explorer of sorts. I love to wander through mountains and experience different cultures through traveling. And I also like to be introspective. And I have a couple of different roles, I guess, I've played over my lifetime. To be honest, becoming an author is something pretty new for me. It wasn't really in my life's plan. My initial motivation for writing my book, If I Live Until Morning, was just to heal myself from emotional trauma associated with my fabulous ski trip that ended with a horrific 5-day life-threatening survival epic. But then I realized I had a really powerful story, so I thought maybe that could help others. So I put it out into the world as an actual book. But prior to becoming an author, I was a park ranger with the U.S. National Park Service and also did different things with that. But just to give you a little bit of background, my main job was giving inspirational and educational programs to the public. And a few highlights of that ranger career was I served as the personal guide to the Emperor and Empress of Japan when they came to Colorado to Rocky Mountain National Park. And I've been an artist and resident coordinator with the Park Service. And probably my claim to fame, besides my great fall off the mountain, is I celebrated my 21st birthday as a wilderness ranger in Glacier National Park. And I spent my birthday in a tree with a angry black bear circling around the tree for 2 hours. So no pubs for me. So that was an exciting birthday. And then lastly, I've worked as a trekking guide in Nepal and Thailand and as a consultant with the World Wildlife Fund in the Kingdom of Bhutan.
Oh, fantastic. And did you grow up in the Rocky Mountains?
Yeah, I did. I've lived in a lot of different states, primarily Colorado and California. And of course, my ranger career has taken me to a few other states. But I grew up in the Denver area. And so I've been in love with mountains since probably the day I was born.
Oh, that sounds so incredible. And was your family outdoorsy? Were you going out hiking and going out into the outdoors on a regular basis?
Well, sort of. I wouldn't consider my family super outdoorsy, but I would say that one of the primary things I remember doing as a kid is we did drive into the mountains and we did go camping and fishing, but we went skiing a lot. And this was downhill skiing at that time. And I loved skiing. I mean, it was just such a fabulous experience. My mom wasn't particularly outdoorsy, but she was a good sport about it. And I think, another riveting experience in my childhood was that my father sent me to camp during the summer for 3 years. Now, not for the whole summer, that would have been great, but, a week or two. And those were really transformative experiences. I remember sending kind of some letters home, which camp required. And I remember putting on my return address, heaven, because I didn't want to come home.
When you think back to when you were a child, what did you dream about doing in the future? Did you dream about becoming, working for the National Park Service?
No, I actually didn't. It hadn't really occurred to me. I had a variety of dreams. I, for a while, wanted to be an astronaut, and I also really wanted to travel to Japan. That was a lifetime childhood dream, which I later realized for my 50th birthday. And I thought about a variety of other things for a while. I thought about being a police officer, and I kind of outgrew all of those things. And what was the turning point for me was actually I had a cousin when I was in high school. Actually, I was on the verge of graduating from high school, and he had an opportunity to work as a national park ranger up in Alaska at Denali National Park. And my uncle and him were driving together up to Alaska, and I got invited to join them. And even though I grew up in the Colorado Rockies, to see those big mountains up there. And I remember that clear thought when I dropped my cousin off was like, wow, I could live and work in a place like this. And so that kind of set that momentum towards becoming a park ranger.
What happened after you left high school? Did you want to go to college, to university? Did you want to go traveling? Did you have a plan? What happened next for you?
I went to college and, I had a real shift in college. I started out majoring that first year in more criminal justice. And I soon decided that wasn't for me. And again, that park ranger idea was really starting to rise up in my consciousness. And I met people that were also doing that. And then I also met a professor that was really profound in shaping my life. His name was Bob O'Brien. And he had traveled a lot, and he had been a park ranger seasonally for a while. And he also inspired my dream to see the Himalayas. And so ultimately, my degree was in resource and environmental geography.
Is that when you started your career in the US National Park Service?
Yeah, my first position was as a wilderness or backcountry ranger in Glacier National Park up on the Montana Canadian border. And that's when I lived in this log cabin 15 miles from the nearest road, and it was really remote. And to give you an idea of how remote it was, I saw 52 people the entire summer because I counted them. And that's when I celebrated my birthday in the tree with the bear.
How did you handle that remoteness? Would you say that you're a loner, or that you prefer spending time by yourself, or did you find it sort of more empowering, or was it something that you struggled with?
It was a little bit of many of those. I hadn't really spent time like that by myself. And, I was green in the sense of I didn't know what I was doing. I had to learn everything the hard way that summer. And I do remember at times being lonely, but I felt like it was also very empowering. So I wouldn't describe myself a loner. I love how my partner, Paul, sums up the difference between somebody that is more of an introvert versus an extrovert. And he says that an extrovert is somebody that recharges by being with people, and an introvert recharges by spending some time by themselves. And so, due to my career, I've been always in the public face, but I would describe myself more as that introvert. I love my time alone. And over the course of my adult lifetime, I've really cultivated value my time alone. It's just silence is golden in a really nice, spacious way to kind of live in the universe.
So when did you start doing your own sort of personal challenges and adventures? When did that start happening for you?
I think I would have to say the real first challenge was that summer as a wilderness ranger, just because that was very physically demanding. And again, being alone so far in the wilderness with very limited like radio contact and whatever was quite challenging. But then after that, I was doing hiking adventures, but quickly I met my skiing partner, Ken, who's featured in my book. And later I married to and later became my ex. But at any rate, we did a lot of adventures together, and we started doing a lot of Trans-Sierra ski trips in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California together. I was living there at the time because that's mostly where I went to college, was in California. And then we started planning this major expedition, which we called the 1982 Trans-Sierra cross-country ski expedition. So we could just expand on what we had already done. And I've been doing quite a bit of rock climbing by then too. So a lot of that really happened more in college.
Tell us more about the 1982 expedition. What was the dream? What was the goal?
Yeah, so the way that actually came about is I had hoped to hike the Muir Trail, which is in the Sierra Nevada range. If you're familiar with the Pacific Crest Trail, which I know many of your listeners are, which goes from the Canadian border to Mexico, through the Cascade Mountains, through Washington and Oregon State, and then through the Sierras in California. The Muir Trail is a segment of the Pacific Crest Trail. And the Muir Trail is 211 miles long, or 240 kilometers. And it's goes through what I would consider the most scenic area of that greater Pacific Crest Trail. Of course, that's my personal bias. Very, very rugged terrain. There are 11 passes to cross, and they range anywhere from 10,000 to just over 13,000 feet, or 3,000 meters to 4,000 meters roughly. And a lot of up and down, a lot of terrain above tree line. And I'd wanted to hike it the year before I had met Ken, and then that fell apart. And then when I met Ken actually on a rock climbing outing with the university, he told me he wanted to ski the Muir Trail, and he'd already hiked it. And since I grew up on skis in Colorado, it just seemed like a natural thing. And I sensed right away he wanted me along on the trip. And so we soon started plotting that. And it took us 3 years to plan for it and to train for it. And there were a lot of logistical things because we had to get some new equipment, and the equipment wasn't very good back then, so we also had to make some of our own. And we also had to put together four buckets of food that represented about a week's worth of food, and go in advance to the mountains and ski these buckets in and tie them into a tree and make sure we knew exactly where to find them, because there wasn't, the GPS then, so that when we were skiing along the trail, we'd actually be able to locate our food sources along the way. It's a pretty big undertaking.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Amazing.
Yeah, and the other thing I should mention, so, people ski that trail today, but they ski it on these wonderful ski mountaineering skis. We were skiing on skinny Nordic cross-country skis without metal edges and with really small boots that would be kind of like a street shoe, you might wear in London every day, except they're made for skis and with 3-pin bindings. So skiing this kind of rugged terrain with a heavy 35-pound pack on, and it was just a real challenge for sure.
What were you sort of most concerned about before setting off on that adventure? Did you have any fears or concerns or worries?
Yeah, I actually did. The main concern was avalanches, because you're in the backcountry, very remote, and the Sierra Nevada range typically gets a lot of snow. And as it turned out, in 1982, the Sierra snowpack was 128% of normal, so way more snow than the usual amount. And so we actually had to delay our trip by a month due to the avalanche hazard, which turned out to be a really good thing, because we did cross a lot of avalanche debris and some alarming notes that had been left in this one shelter along the way, actually the only shelter along the way, about the life-threatening avalanche conditions. So that was a good thing. So that was my main fear before and then during the trip.
Yeah. And tell us more about the trip, because something pretty, I don't know the word to use, I was going to say big, impactful, challenging, happened during that journey. Would you like to share more about that?
Sure. Let me give your listeners a little bit of background. So the ski trip, I always want to qualify as fabulous. I mean, it was just a wonderful trip. We had our challenges, besides having to cross avalanche debris, which would be like broken trees and branches and chunks of snow that would be 5 to 18 feet high on these narrow skis. That was always a challenge. But one of the greater challenges of skiing was occasionally we would have these rotten pits of snow, and underneath the snow would be a hidden buried tree stump, or maybe a hidden rock, that was absorbing heat under the snow from the sunlight. And basically we'd be skiing along and the snow looked perfectly normal, and then poof, the snow would just collapse and we would be up to our hips in snow, and then have to crawl out of that, and then you would ski another 100 feet and another one. It was like booby traps, and that was really agonizing. It didn't happen often, but when it did happen, it was just horrific. But we saw some magical sights, and changing snow conditions were always a challenge. And Ken broke his ski 40 miles from the end of the trip, and we had to get rather creative in putting that back together, kind of doing some surgery, if you will, on the ski. And then we had to abandon one of our food caches because the avalanche danger was too strong in one area. And so later we had to go get that cache out of the mountains in the fall. I'm kind of rambling, but that's kind of the ski trip. And then the ski trip was coming to an end. We got ahead of schedule. So that's an important thing as part of the story, is we had our itinerary with our parents, and we just skied from sun up to sundown every day. And we made a lot of, real distance gain, more than we thought in a given day. And so when we got to the culminating point in our trip, which was climbing Mount Whitney, that's the highest peak in the lower 48 or continental United States. And that peak is 14,505 feet, or 4,300 meters. So that was going to be what we thought the last day. And well, it wasn't. That's where this whole tragedy occurred. I suspect you want to hear all about that too, right?
Well, only as much as you're comfortable of sharing, because I don't want you to relive your trauma.
So that's a funny thing. So one of the interesting things in my backstory is that Ken, my ski partner, who later became my husband, he wouldn't let me talk about this. And that became a real source of me not healing emotionally and at some level physically, and definitely was the basis of our relationship falling apart. But that said, since I wrote this book, it's been really healing for me. So I don't mind talking about anything with that. So basically, what happened is we climbed Mount Whitney and got to the top, and that was going to be the last day. And we thought we would be coming out the summer trail route and the end of our trip. So we get to the summit, and again, we're at the highest peak in the continental United States, and this storm comes in, and it's snowing and it's blowing, and it is lightning. You don't want to be on the highest point in the lower 48 states in a lightning storm. And there was a metal or shelter up there. It was a stone shelter with a metal roof, and it was full of ice, and the roof was buzzing, and Ken and I's hair were standing up, and lightning was striking around. It was like, oh, and what to do. So we made a decision not to go down the route we had hoped to, because that would be traversing along this long ridge called Trail Crest into the storm. And so we needed to get down fast. So we opted to go down the north face, which is very steep. And we went down a bunch of some couloirs or steep snow-filled gullies. And not too long after we got into the gully, we were not skiing down, I should mention. We were down climbing with our ice axes, kind of hanging from our ice axes, quite literally. And our skis were tied in our packs. And Ken hit a patch of ice, and he completely disappeared from my sight. Like he flew down the mountain. And so this leaves me for several hours in this pretty traumatized state of fear. Like, is he dead? Is he alive? What's going to happen when I get down? And I actually had to really coach myself and just tell myself, go slow, because if you blow it, everything hinges on you making it down. And that was probably the most fear-filled moment of my life. And so I just took my time with my ice axe getting down, and Ken actually fell 800 feet, and that would be about 243 meters, which is inconceivable, and had very minimal injuries. I think he bounced just right and all that. But he eventually came up the mountain and met me as I was coming down after several hours. And then he was trying to negotiate this cliff band. And things were icing up with the storm and all that. And so what happened was he said, I'll go down and get the rope, because the rope was with his pack, and he left his pack where he landed from his fall. And he down climbed through this little bit of cliff band and then was able to exit the cliff band. I thought, well, I'm fit, and I was really fit, and I'm strong, and he down climbed, so I can too. Well, that was a very fateful mistake. I basically got down about 10 feet. Remember, I have 35 pounds on my back. I have little ski boots on, and I'm little nubbins on the rock, and it's cold and stormy. And I couldn't reach the holds that he had reached. And so I kept trying, and I wound up falling about 150 to 165 feet, which is 45 to 50 meters. But I bounced through the rocks, literally, and had very severe injuries. So that was just the beginning of a long journey in my life.
I mean, did it knock you out going to the bottom, or were you sort of, do you remember it? Like, is it a case of going like, holy shit? Oh my God.
Well, it was a case of true desperation. I remember holding on to these little holds and getting tired and cold, and I had no place to go. I couldn't reach any of the other holds, and my legs were doing what's called sewing machine legs for climbers, where my leg is just vibrating up and down. It's getting fatigued. And the last thought I had before I fell was, God, don't let me fall. And then the next thing was I heard this boom, and that was my head hitting on the rocks. And then I went unconscious, with the exception of, I couldn't think anymore. My world went dark. I couldn't feel anything physically, but I could hear me hitting the rocks as I went down. And so that was kind of a weird void to be in. And it's almost dark, by the way. Okay, it's twilight. And when I landed in the snow, I kind of woke up and Ken was standing there rather frantic, are you okay? Are you okay? And I knew something was terribly wrong and I knew I was injured, but I wasn't quite able to put the events together right away. But I did get a head injury. And do you want to hear my long list of injuries?
Well, the title of your book is called "If I Live Until Morning,"
Yeah,
so let's
yeah.
just. I'm almost. Yeah. Let's hear your injuries.
Okay, you can do what you want with them. So in my spine, with my thoracic spine, I fractured T12, and my lumbar spine L1, L2, L5. My sacrum was in three pieces. My tailbone was in smithereens, as the doctor said, and I had a possible fracture they never followed up on for whatever reason on my pubic bone in my right hip, and I had rotated sacroiliac joints, and I had severe nerve damage to my bladder. I could not pee at this point for 5 days till I got to the hospital. And I had a head injury and massive internal bleeding and a hematoma. And I wound up getting gangrene on my left buttock, like big time. And I had some frostbite. So I was not in a good way.
I mean, because we're sort of like not joking, but we're sort of like well, listing your injuries and stuff. But it's one of those things that that I assume like most people think about. Look, there's an element of risk when you go out into the mountains, when you go on adventures, and you try and you manage that risk as much as you possibly can. But actually, sometimes accidents happen. You can slip, you can fall, and then suddenly you're in this incredibly difficult, challenging survival situation, which is like the title of your book, If I Live Until Morning. I mean, what, how, I mean, how, where, where do you even go from there? I mean, like how, because it's, I'm just trying to think back in like 1982 as well. It's not, did you have mobile? I don't even know if you had mobile phones in 1982.
No, mobile phones didn't exist, and there weren't the GPS, personal locator, emergency beacons, none of that. So, and now again, we're a week ahead of schedule. So parents and friends are not concerned, right? Here we are. So we knew we were entirely on our own. Like if we were going to get out, this was up to us. And so what happened is Ken set up our tiny tent on the side of the mountain, and we wound up being in that tent for 2 days. But to back up a little bit, I'm in that tent. I'm getting ready to go to sleep that night because again, it was close to well, it was twilight when this happened. And then I had this sense of the presence of death floating above me. I don't quite know how to describe that right before I went to sleep. And that's where the title of my book comes, because I felt like, okay, I might die. The odds are actually probably pretty high, but I can't fight this. I mean, it's going to be or it's not going to be. And I made this vow. I was very lucid before I went to sleep. And that vow was, if I live until morning, I will live my greatest dreams. And so that's where that title comes. And then the next morning I woke up and I was alive. And I did ask Ken to stay awake all night because I thought my breathing might stop. And then the next 2 days we were pinned on the mountain, and we were at a campsite on the mountain at 4,000 meters or just over 13,000 feet. And what happened is this mantra just naturally arose from somewhere in my mind. And it was, I'm going to live. I'm going to live. I'm going to live. And I literally repeated that mantra for 2 days. And I said it internally in my mind. So Ken wasn't worried that I was saying that. And I said it unless I was sleeping or unless I was talking to Ken. And during those 2 days, we were also trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the best plan? Do we go out together? Does he go out without me? Because we have to get out, kind of a thing.
Did you ever despair? Did hope ever disappear, or were you always hopeful that you were going to get out, you were going to make it out?
I had some despair, but mostly hope, because I had this probably unrealistic expectation. Well, if I make it to the morning, I'm going to live. But then there was the reality of to get out was going to be a rather daunting accomplishment. And to give you a sense of what that looks like, from the summit of Mount Whitney to the trailhead where the road ends, we would have to traverse 7 miles or 11 kilometers and have to descend through very rugged trailless terrain for 7,400 feet or just over 1,400 meters. And so this was not going to be easy. And so when we actually started to leave, it took us actually 5 days from the summit till we got to the road to be able to get out. I had to put 35 pounds on my broken spine and pelvis, and we didn't have our skis because I had tossed them down the mountain in desperation at a certain point before I fell. And so we crawled out quite literally. There were times I was on my hands and knees. There were times I sank up to my mid thigh level with every step with this broken back and this heavy pack. And that's more when I reached that point of despair. I'd occasionally look up at the mountains. I remember feeling so humbled by them, like I had never been humbled before. And there was that uncertainty, like, am I really going to make it out? Am I going to get paralyzed with the next step when my bones shift? Or am I going to just die out here? But my thinking was that, I had two choices. I could lay there and die, or I could try to get out and either make it or die. But I was going to at least die trying. So I was very determined. And I really think what kept me going was I had this strong dream, which I think I mentioned earlier, of seeing the Himalayas. That was like the single most important thing to me that I wanted to achieve at that point in my life. And so when I would collapse, particularly as I got closer to the road and I thought, I can't keep doing this, I would just remember that dream. And somehow that gave me the strength to get up and keep going, one foot in front of the other.
What was the pain levels like? Or was the adrenaline flowing? Like, I know this sounds a stupid question because you must be in pain, but does it get to a point? This is going to be a rubbish comparison, so I apologize. The only thing I can think of is when if you're doing lots of hiking, you get blisters, and then when you start walking in the morning and like your blisters and your feet hurt, but then after 10 minutes the pain subsides because it's like your body knows that this is what it's going to do, so it just shuts that off. Did that happen for you, or was it constant pain, never ending pain, or were you able to, like, could you manage it? Like how? Like how? I just how 5 days crawling with a broken spine and these broken bones and
it was horrible, but it wasn't maybe as bad as you might think. I like your comparison with the blisters. Yeah, because here's actually what happened. I knew I was injured as soon as I came to after my fall. I was like, oh, things are good. And I remember when Ken was setting up the tent and I was looking at Mount Russell and the last rays of the sun were on that mountain. And I thought, wow, this is a beautiful place to die, because I thought I really might die. And I was in pain and, there was blood everywhere. And the only painkillers we had with us were aspirin. And I certainly took aspirin for those 5 days, or at least until we ran out. But the interesting thing was I was uncomfortable sleeping in the tent because there were rocks under our pads. And I couldn't get positioned comfortably because I had so many injuries. I felt like I was shifting all the time, which is probably the case now. I'm still shifting all the time because it's hard to be comfortable in my body. But at any rate, the most comfortable position was actually laying on my stomach. But the problem was my bladder was damaged and I couldn't pee. And then you're getting the urine building up in your lower regions, and that's pressure. And so actually not being able to pee for 5 days, I want you to imagine that, okay? That was probably the worst of everything. And I do think adrenaline kicked over or kicked in, and I was in a state of medical shock because I lost a lot of blood. When I got to the hospital, I required 5 pints of blood products, and that's quite a bit. And I was just in shock. And I remember, hurting, but it was manageable because I was really focused on getting out alive. And the interesting thing is when I got to the trailhead where the road is, and of course there was no one there for a little while, that's when I let myself cry. And that's when I let myself feel the full brunt of my pain. It was like I shut it off, because if I fell into it and became a victim of it and just kind of let it overwhelm me like a tidal wave, I wouldn't have made it. I would have just died, but that's what it took. So I think in a lot of circumstances, and, I think everybody's experienced this to some degree, where you have some sort of crisis happen in your life and it demands immediate attention. We just rise to the occasion and we do what needs to be done, and then we fall apart. And that was kind of the case with me and my pain levels.
Falling apart, and then I suppose the next adventure, the next challenge is actually putting yourself back together again, like going through that process of recovery, not only physically with your body, but mentally and emotionally, going through something like that, because it's a trauma, trauma on so many different levels. How long would you say the recovery process took? Did you ever think that you wouldn't get back out to the mountains again, or was that something that you knew that you wanted to do? Like, how was that recovery process?
Well, interestingly enough, on a kind of smaller, short time frame, when I was at the hospital, and you have to remember, there's this little town that was the nearest hospital. It was actually a geriatrics facility, and they happened to have two beds dedicated to an actual hospital. It's still that way, but at any rate, so it wasn't the best facility, but it certainly saved my life. And I remember the doctors there, and then later some other doctors saying to me, well, you'll never hike again. And I'm the kind of person, if you tell me, oh, you'll never do this again, and it's really important to me, my little inner voice will kick in and say, oh, yeah? You watch, I'll prove you wrong. Like, I'll see that as a challenge, So there's your tough girl challenge. I'm like, no, I'm going to hike again. And I certainly did go on to hike again and do a lot of activity. But to look at more the long-term consequences, because I think that's something we often don't think about, particularly when we're young and we feel a little more invincible and we're fit and strong, like, oh, well, we'll just recover. And the truth is, this has ramifications for the rest of your life, both emotionally and physically. And for me, healing both of those took at least 30 years. I mean, it was a lifetime struggle. And I still have to deal with my body every day and stretch and take care of it. And as I'm aging, that's important. But yeah, the journey is not over. So I would say, a lot of people are a little surprised because when they do read my book, a lot of people just want the adventure. And that's the first third of the book. And that was all I was going to write. But my aunt called me and she said, that's not the whole story. And you need to tell the juicy stuff of what really happens in life as a result of that. And so I go into all of that in my book because it is a big journey and it's a huge thing to heal.
Absolutely. And one of the things that you talked about was, during that moment of challenge was about, if I live until morning, I'm going to live my greatest life and, live my ambitions and live my dreams. And you mentioned one of those dreams being the Himalayas. I'd love for you to share more about what it was like when you got out to the Himalayas and being there after you'd survived something like this, dreamt about it, and then suddenly you're there living your best life.
Yeah, that's such a great question because that was a really pivotal moment in my life. I'll have to say that, my ski trip and my fall on Mount Whitney were life-changing events, but then going to the Himalayas was life-changing for me too. I very much remember standing on Kalapatar, which I know many of your listeners have been to in the Everest region, and my main goal was to see Mount Everest, and I'm looking at the mountain and the sun is setting and it's turning orange and I am bawling. I mean, I'm just crying because that was the very moment that I had strived to live for when I was trying to get out alive from Mount Whitney, and now here it was. So it was a huge accomplishment. And I know a lot of mountaineers have died on Mount Whitney, and so that has a different set of emotions and symbolism for them. But for me, Mount Everest was a symbol of life because I had achieved my goal, and the joy I got from that and the strength. And, I think one of the things that happens with all of your tough women, tough girls that you interview is they've been through some stuff. They had to, because these adventures, whatever they are going to challenge us in our own ways. And I think we built strength and character on that. And I certainly did. And so realizing that dream, it just helps me realize I can get through anything in life. May be difficult, but I can do it. And it gives me strength that I can accomplish other dreams. And obviously you may have to modify those with time and aging and change, but it was fabulous. And then going to the Himalayas really shaped the rest of my life in terms of my values and my belief system. And I ultimately went back, and it's my favorite place in the world now, hands down.
You said as well, that actually not being able to talk about what happened to you with your partner at the time, Ken, was one of the reasons that the relationship didn't survive. but then you talked about, writing the book. You found that sort of therapeutic almost. And how was it for you to actually sit down and to write this incredibly personal story about the adventure, the tragedy, and the transformation that you went through? How long did that process take?
The actual writing took 6 years. Keep in mind, I was working full time then too. So my job was as a park ranger at the time was very demanding in the summer. So I'd have to kind of put the book aside for months at a time and then kind of delve into it, particularly in the winter time. But it was actually very healing because it was like I didn't have my voice with Ken, and now I was finding my voice. And by having to write it down, and of course you have to rewrite and re-edit and all of that, I found I was processing that. And the real big kicker for me was it started to make me very curious about the mountain and curious about my experience. And so the traumatic part was I wanted to find out, where exactly did I fall? And Google Earth didn't exist, way back then, but it exists now. And so I got on Google Earth, and that was my first time on Google Earth, which was challenging to learn to navigate. And I was going down the mountain. And at first, sometimes you can let go of the keyboard on Google Earth and it kind of goes way out underneath you. Well, that would happen to me right where I was falling. And so that would be very like, and I'd feel that inside of me, like, kind of shutting down like I was going to fall again. But over time that got easier. And then the interesting thing that started happening is I wrote that and I got comfortable with it. I started to want to go back to Mount Whitney, and I never thought that would happen. And I actually trained for it. And years later, my partner Paul and I and a friend of his, we went back to the north face of Whitney to look for my skis, and we found where I fell and where I camped, and that caused me to lose it emotionally, but it was a processing. It was cathartic and very healing for me. And then, of course, I've been doing book talks and things, and that's very healing. So I encourage people to find their voice through their traumas.
Yeah, randomly, that was going to be my next question. Have you ever been back to Whitney? I can't even imagine what that was like emotionally, just being there, like just standing there and seeing that, because it's almost like it's this point in time, isn't it, where your life has changed forever. Yes. It is like, yes. It's literally that blink, that one slip, that slide, that impact that it's had on you. How did you find getting back into the mountains, getting back into hiking, getting back into adventures after you'd recovered? Was that easy for you to do mentally and physically?
Yeah, it was. The only exception to that was rock climbing. I did continue to rock climb for a number of years, but by then I was married to Ken, and he was a pretty hardcore climber, and he would push me so that I was always climbing my limits. And actually that re-traumatized me over and over and over again. I ultimately gave up climbing. I kind of damaged my tendons and my elbows and things. And it was just emotionally, that was the piece I couldn't get over, was this drop off, even though I was safeguarded by a rope and everything. Emotionally, it's like, that's just reliving it. I don't need to do that level of reliving the fall. But I did go on, and I snowshoed and skied and hiked, and that seemed to be quite fine. I mean, I did start to have a breakdown of my body, so that by 2000 and I want to say 6 or 7, I wound up I was in a point then where my injuries came back to haunt me, and I was using a walker, and I was on pain medicines all the time, and I couldn't walk 10 feet, without help. And that was a really dark part in my life story where this all came back, that moment in time from the past. Here it was again, but, I continued to find medical practitioners, and that's part of when I saw a trauma therapist who said, write a book. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. I know everybody's asked me to do that. I'll finally do this. And I also went to Nepal for medical treatment, and that was very transformative. I had an amazing practitioner there.
Because one of the things that you talk about is through sharing your story, you hope to give others the strength and the courage to help them transform their own lives and to help them follow their dreams. What would you say has been the biggest lesson that you've learned from this experience that you've been through?
And when you say from this experience, do you mean from the actual fall or from the sharing of it?
I'd say from both of it, going through the experience and then actually having to, not having to, but reliving it and sharing, what you've learned.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah. The biggest thing I learned actually from the fall was that your mind is everything. And your mind can determine so much of outcomes. I mean, we're all going to have circumstances that happen, but how we deal with that mentally has a lot to do with kind of our experience of life as a result of whatever we're dealing with. So, for example, right away on Mount Whitney, I had that mantra, I'm going to live, I'm going to live. And I lived and I set my intention to get out alive and I did it. And then I've had to deal with, 18 years of chronic pain and the loss of loved ones and family members and divorce and just all those kinds of things that people deal with. And I really believe that it was my mind that's gotten me through that. And I've become a pretty serious Tibetan Buddhist meditation practitioner, and that's all about the mind. And so I've really discovered the power of the mind. And that's been a good lesson for me. And then in sharing my story, that's been very empowering because it helps me to realize that, yeah, it's my story, but it's also the story of the human condition. And everybody has their Mount Whitneys and their emotional traumas, whatever they are. We all have our stuff, right? And I feel like by sharing my personal story, and I shared it all in the book, it's raw and it is honest. And some people may say I shared too much, but I felt that by being that honest with how this event shaped my life, that people might see their own stuff through that. And I really did want to give them the courage that, if I can heal this and deal with it, you can too. You've got to face those fears and those traumas and work through them in your own way. And I feel that if we do that, we all can have a better quality of life. And I really want that for people. I want them to have the best life they can. I've lived my life to the fullest because I had to face death. And so I throw that out there for that. And I also wanted to inspire people to realize their dreams. Life is really short. But I also want them, because I know your audience is all about being an adventurer, which I am too. But do your adventures mindfully and be aware that every step we're taking a decision that could be life or death or life changing. And so adventure is a great thing, but temper it with some realism as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think sometimes it's always easy to focus on the positives and reaching the summits and these amazing physical challenges and mental challenges that people overcome, and it's easy to see when everything goes right, when everything does go to plan, but actually right. Things do happen, like I was going to say avalanches, but avalanches happen, slips happen, storms happen, mistakes can be made, just you miss a grip, you miss a hold, and it's like, and it can be life-changing and an impact on you, and it's a reality of adventure. Like adventuring, there's always risks involved, and it is about managing those risks. And Jean, where is the best place for people to find out more information about you, to find information on your books? Because I know you also have an audio version as well. Where would you send them to?
Right. To find information about my books, probably going on Amazon is good, or audible.com for the audiobook, although you can also get that on Amazon. And then to find out information about me, I would say my website, Jean Muenchrath, you have to spell that for them, .com is good. And, I also have a YouTube video, and I'm getting more interviews out there and whatnot, but I post those on my website too. So that's probably a good place for people to start. And my email is on there if they'd like to email me. I'm happy to respond when I'm not out having an adventure.
Fantastic. I was going to say, did you record your audiobook yourself? Are you narrating it?
That was a hard call for me, because when I would talk to book clubs, they were like, oh, you have to do it in your own voice. And I wanted it in my own voice. But then when I actually looked into it, the truth of the matter is, I wanted it very professional. I want the best product I can put out there. And I realized that, I'm not always good at reading out loud with stuff. Like I'll seem to trip over my words. And I was like, no. How do I find the right person? So I actually went through the acxaudible.com way of pairing you up with a narrator, and Sarah Brands is my narrator, and I'm just thrilled to have been working with her, and I think she did a brilliant job. And in fact, I've had a few people that know me very closely, and they've listened to her and like, wow, she sounds somewhat like you. I mean, it's not my voice, of course, but I feel she did a great job representing my emotions and the nuances of who I am, and so I'm thrilled to death with that.
Fabulous. And you are an Amazon best-selling author, and you got the Best Book Award sponsored by American Book Fest in 2018, which is incredible. I mean, what an adventure. I mean, I know it's very difficult to obviously cover everything in as much depth as we want to, and that's why obviously I'd highly encourage everyone to go and buy the book. If I live until morning, I'll be making sure that I put all of the links to your website, to Amazon, to your booksellers where people can listen to the books and buy the books. But Jean, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast and sharing more about this journey and this amazing adventure and the transformation that you've been on and what you've learned from going through this experience, this life-changing experience. Absolutely inspiring.
Oh, you're so welcome. And I'll send you a small video clip of when we went back to look for our skis so people can see the cliffs where I actually fell through. Of course, they'll be seeing it when it's during the summer months rather than during the winter. But I'll send that because that might be of interest to people too, to kind of get a sense of the place.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'll make sure that I put that in the show notes as well, which will be able to be found at toughgirlchallenges.com. But Jean, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I appreciate the work you do to help inspire young and old women alike to get out and enjoy the beauty of nature and have their challenges in life to become better persons.
Hey Tribe, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Jean. My name is Sarah Williams. I'm the host of the Tough Girl podcast and the founder of Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring you and increasing the amount of female role models in the media. So I've got a little surprise for members of the Tough Girl Tribe and for patrons. Jean has very kindly agreed to do a giveaway. She's got a number of audio vouchers available. So I'm going to be doing a giveaway for patrons and for members of the Tough Girl Tribe. So make sure that you check that out. For those of you who are thinking, what is the Tough Girl Tribe and what is a patron? Let me tell you. So patrons are the financial supporters of the Tough Girl podcast. It's what allows me to produce this content on a regular basis. If you'd like to support the Tough Girl podcast, you can sign up as a patron by visiting Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. There's various tiers that you can sign up at. You can sign up in US dollars, sterling, and euros. You can sign up on a monthly basis. You can sign up on an annual basis. If that's not for you, you can also make a one-off donation via PayPal, and actually you can also set up a monthly donation via PayPal as well. But it really does make a massive difference. Having a regular source of income coming in every single month. It allows me to pay for the running costs. It pays for my time to edit and produce these episodes and get this content out there, which is so important in helping to increase the amount of female role models in the media. I very much believe that when women can see and hear other women doing these incredible challenges, that they start to think, well, hold on, she's just like me, and if she can do it, then why can't I do it? I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to try. And then when those women try and give things a go, they're going to motivate and inspire their family, their friends, and those women are going to give things a try. And they're going to motivate and inspire their friends and their family. And it's just going to create this massive positive spiral of awesome women doing awesome challenges. I also mentioned the Tough Girl Tribe. The Tough Girl Tribe is a closed Facebook community that I run for the patrons and guests of the Tough Girl podcast. It has been closed to new members for the past couple of years. The only way that you're able to join is if you become a patron at the $5 minimum level and above. But in that community, you get more access to me and access to incredible women around the world who have the same missions and values, and they love adventure and the outdoors, and it's an incredibly supportive environment. And I just want to share a little story from the Tough Girl Tribe. So way back in 2017, I thru hiked the Appalachian Trail, and I decided the time frame that I was going to do this challenge in was 100 days. And Ray Red, a member of the Tough Girl Tribe, set up a 100-day challenge for members of the Tough Girl Tribe, which started on the 3rd of June and would run till the 10th of September, so the end of my physical challenge. And Rosie shared a post a couple of weeks ago just sort of saying, 2 years today was the start of the 2018 Tough Girl 100-Day Habit Challenge. And Rosie chose 30 minutes a day outside walking, running, or cycling. 730 days later, and she's still doing it. Not one day missed. It's a habit for a life now. Absolutely incredible. Rosie, massive well done. It's amazing that you are still doing this challenge, still participating, still getting outside for 30 minutes a day, walking, running, or cycling. So proud of you, and so proud for everybody who is taking up new habits and trying new things and getting outside your comfort zone. It makes such a massive difference for your life and what you're doing. So please try and be proactive. Please try and take that first step wherever you are. Start, get outside if you can. Just spend, if you can't make 30 minutes a day outside, try 10 minutes, try 5 minutes, walk around the block. Just try doing something new, because it's going to add so much value to your life. But I do just want to say a massive thank you again to all the patrons and all the listeners on the Tough Girl podcast. New episodes come out on a Tuesday and Thursday, 7 a.m. UK time. How the message spreads is via word of mouth. So if you could tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast, that would be fantastic. If you can share it on social media, that would be amazing as well. But I'll be back with you next Tuesday. Take care. Lots of love. Oh, and I can't remember if I've given you the website address, but if you haven't checked out toughgirlchallenges.com, please do go and visit the website. Make sure you follow along on my Instagram, Twitter, social media accounts. Go and check out the YouTube videos and all that fun stuff. But I will be back with you soon. Take care. Lots of love. Bye.